Listen, I've lived in Sunnyvale Estates for 8 years, and let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the kind of HOA Karen drama that turns a quiet suburb into a battlefield of petty rules and power trips. This isn't some made-up tale for clicks. It's pulled straight from the kind of real-life headaches I've seen. And yeah, my mom worked in admin, so I know the signs. All names, addresses, and those ridiculous rule numbers are change, of course. But the cold truth? It's going to hit home if you've ever dealt with these people. Now, buckle up, because this one gets icy fast. It started with shouting echoing down the cul-de-sac, doors slamming like they were auditioning for a reality show, the kind of noise that screams someone's about to lose their mind over a 2-inch grass blade. My laptop screen was still glowing with the HOA portal logs, but I wasn't scrolling through violation reports anymore. I was replaying the community chat message Karen sent that morning. Push back your bylaws review presentation to next week. Board bandwidth is tight today with important community standards to uphold. That was at 9:12 a.m. At 9:57 a.m., the internal system tagged an unauthorized rollback attempt on the core compliance config. 5 fails in a row. Then the activity log just stopped. The weird part? I never pushed that update live. The weirder part? Only the board president had access privileges I hadn't granted. If you're new here and haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do it now. It keeps these HOA Karen stories coming and keeps the team motivated. A like wouldn't hurt either. Thanks. Anyway, by noon, I had 3 missed calls from neighbors who usually just ping me in the group chat, not the phone. Something was seriously off. My fingers moved on autopilot, checking the portal health, violation queues, enforcement schedules. Everything looked fine on the surface because technically nothing was broken. That's why I built back when the HOA was still in its duct tape and coffee phase. I coded the first scalable compliance sync protocol for our violation tracking and rule enforcement engines. We didn't have fancy HOA management software back then, so I rolled my own version, linking resident reports, versioning of bylaws, and board flags with a timestamp key that flagged any unauthorized clones. It wasn't flashy, but it worked, and every board member who signed off on it forgot about the clause I tucked in under the license structure. Clause 8.4c. Unauthorized representation of custodial systems triggers audit lockdown. That clause hadn't fired in 4 years until today. The only thing I got that morning was a passive-aggressive group chat from Karen at 11:14. Let's touch base next week. Some decisions have been made regarding the streamlined rule roadmap. No emoji, no context, which would have been fine except I hadn't been briefed. Not on the revisions, not on the presentation, not even on the demo that apparently had already happened without me. So I checked my calendar. Nothing. I checked the share drive. The latest version wasn't mine. And then I checked the audit trail, and there it was. Access trace. Karen Colton, exec. Timestamp 3:12 a.m. The system doesn't log casual views unless you bypass normal protocols, which meant someone intentionally suppressed the read receipt. I didn't say anything. I didn't even react. I just opened my local directory, selected the core compliance stream protocol, and did what the clause allowed. I paused the stream. I didn't revoke it. I didn't delete anything. I just paused it, like holding your breath when the neighborhood goes silent. The thing about custody is it's not about control. It's about stewardship. Ownership when others forget who built what. What I constructed wasn't just a violation app. It was a verification archive designed to protect against exactly this kind of power grab. And Karen had just pulled a clone from the wrong branch and slapped her name on it before walking into a board meeting I never got invited to. I didn't yell. I didn't storm over to her McMansion. I just filed a brief report to the internal HOA audit under clause 8.4c. Attached the access log and added one line. Custodial representation violated. Stream paused pending compliance verification. Then I disabled 3 fallback admin tokens tied to legacy credentials. No alerts, no outage. But the countdown had started, and Karen had no idea. I watched her in the community Facebook group later that day, posting like she was recapping brunch plans I'd obviously forgotten to RSVP for. Just the core board, folks, she said again, like that should clear things up. As if I hadn't written every automation that made those rule enforcement go live. As if I hadn't stayed up 3 nights last week syncing the cross-neighborhood sandbox so the demo wouldn't implode in front of the residents. Sounds good. I replied in the same tone I'd use for a barista who forgot my order, but smiled anyway. I walked back to my home office, didn't sit, just stood there for a second, hands resting on the chair like I was studying a fortress. That was the moment. Not the clone, not the calendar ghosting. It was that smirk in her voice when she implied I was just looped out. I opened the core compliance dashboard, pulled up the audit console, and flagged the license anchor under control clause 8.4c. It's not a power play, it's protocol. The clause exists for one reason: to stop unauthorized hands from pretending the system is theirs to present. A few years back, when the board approved infrastructure independence, I embedded the clause with a lawyer's blessing. The language was deliberate. Custodial triggers activate upon falsified representation or exclusion of the architect from rollout proceedings. It wasn't theoretical. It was guardrail code. And now Karen had clipped the guardrail. Full speed, eyes closed. I didn't say a word to her. Didn't ask why I was cut out. Didn't demand a follow-up. I just documented. Flagged the misattribution. Attached the time-stamped clone signature from 3:12 a.m. and the chat message that told me to push back the walkthrough. Timestamp 9:12 a.m. Then I wrote a note to the HOA Audit Committee. Clause 8.4c violation confirmed. Custodial access deferred. Core framework paused pending verification. That's all it takes. One sentence, one clause. Karen wouldn't feel it at first. Custody doesn't explode. It waits. It leans. While that set in, I disabled 3 legacy admin tokens still linked to the original shell. Karen once begged me to leave them open in case of emergencies. All 3 were still live. All 3 still had branch access. All 3 were now gone. I closed the terminal, pulled up my local logs, and watched the commit trail go still. No new pushes, no webhook pings. Then I made coffee. Across the street, I could see Karen laughing with the treasurer in her driveway. Her voice was smug sugar, overconfident, overloud. She loved making other residents feel like they were late to something, like the moment had passed, and it was their fault for missing it. But this time, she wasn't ahead. She was already outside the system. The meeting she smugly recapped, it was technically invalid because under the license they all forgot about, no rollout can be considered compliant if the core custodian is excluded. Clause 8.4c doesn't care who's smiling in the group chat. The worst part is she still thought this was about visibility. It wasn't. It was about proof. And the system, my system, doesn't lie. She edited the wrong branch. Pushed a build that didn't match the approved code tree, replicated my work poorly, and branded it streamlined. That word again, streamlined. Like cutting corners was innovative. By the end of the day, neighbors had started noticing weird behavior in the portal. Sync lags, timeout flags on violation reports. I got a few DMs, quiet ones. Hey, is there something up with the HOA app today? I didn't reply. I just documented the pings, labeled the thread, stored the attachments, and waited. Because when you build the foundation and someone forgets who owns the blueprint, you don't shout. You just flip the breaker and let the silence speak. She waited until just after 5 p.m., like she thought doing it after hours would keep it under the radar. I watched it happen live from my kitchen window, her initials in the portal commit, tagging the clone with a version string I deliberately archived 2 builds ago. It wasn't subtle. It was lazy. A copy-paste deployment scrubbed of real ownership, wrapped in a fresh commit to make it look new. To make it look like hers. It's wild how quiet betrayal sounds when it's digital. No slammed doors, no angry voices, just one line in the log. Compliance stream deploy. AAV3B Colton. Final. That word said everything. The second she did it, Section 9.3 of the governing agreement activated automatically. We'd written it with a specific phrase, custodial withdrawal authorized upon falsified authorship or exclusion from live delivery. It was meant for resident protection, but it worked just fine on middle manager ambition too. I didn't send a warning, didn't fire off an email. That clause doesn't need interpretation. It just needs a trigger. And she gave it to me with a smile. At 5:37 p.m., I remotely revoked the admin token tied to Karen's exec credentials. The system didn't crash. That would have drawn attention. It just stopped sinking quietly, like a cul-de-sac that goes still when someone says something they shouldn't have. By 5:41, the dashboards froze. Load balancer requests timed out. Endpoint health indicators returned blank, not failed, not broken, just unresponsive. And that's worse than red. Red means someone might jump in. Gray means no one knows where to start. By 5:48, two neighbors were in the resident thread whispering diagnostics. Are we in a partial outage? Could be OEH. Violation routes are clean, just no response. I didn't reply. I just downloaded the logs, watermarked them with my escrow key, zipped the bundle, and stored it in a private directory under custody backend off trigger number 1. Then I closed my laptop, not out of spite, out of policy. This wasn't vengeance. It was the framework doing what it was designed to do. Protect the system from people who thought title outranked authorship. I made this thing. Karen marketed it. There's a difference. I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before heading inside, watched her house through the windshield. I could already imagine her upstairs blaming the IT guy she hired last month, asking why the system she just streamlined suddenly wasn't responding, pretending like she hadn't just overwritten the steward key to get a cleaner commit log. Every system has a heartbeat, a signature, and the one Karen pushed had none. At 6:03 p.m., the first official ping came through the group chat. Custodian admin, can we get a live reset? I didn't answer. The system's response was automated anyway. Anyone attempting access would see a plain text response rendered in the portal. Custodial stream paused. Authentication error ID 1342 redacted. It wasn't malicious. It was final because you don't steal the blueprint and expect the foundation to hold. You steal the blueprint and you find out too late that the walls were wired to the architect all along. Launch day for the new rules was supposed to be loud. Buzzing group chats, impromptu driveway coffee runs, Karen pacing in front of her garage like some suburban drill sergeant barking, "Go live in T-5," while refreshing metrics. Instead, it was quiet. So quiet you could hear the sprinklers hum. I came out early, though I didn't need to. My name no longer appeared in the rollout brief. I wasn't CC'd on the stakeholder memo. I didn't exist on the core board, but the system knew me. Still does. At 8:52 a.m., the first check-in hit the thread. Anyone else getting null returns from the violation API? At 9:01, a neighbor replied, "Sandbox works fine. Live just isn't echoing anything." By 9:09, the dashboards were up on Karen's big screen TV during her emergency Zoom, and they were blank. Not red, not an error state, just blank. A horizon with no sun. Karen arrived at 9:17, full of pep and caffeine. "Let's get eyes on traffic." No one replied. One neighbor gestured to the blank monitor. Another scrolled endlessly through logs that weren't updating. Karen's voice started rising. Why isn't the system loading the mirrored instance? One guy, James, the quiet accountant from down the street, finally spoke. "There's no mirrored instance to load." Karen blinked. "What?" "There's no data in the branch you deployed," James repeated. "It's an empty shell. The config paths call modules that don't exist." That's when I knew she'd skipped the notes, the real ones. The structure she pushed was a ghost. Visually similar but gutted. It referenced core components still housed in the escrow stream, the ones you can't overwrite unless you hold the custodian key, which Karen, of course, did not. Because I built the stream with split path validation, every production file carried a signature hash verified, license mapped, and embedded with fallback escrow routing, which meant unless you had the real access token, the files wouldn't error. They'd vanish. At 9:26, the compliance lead posted in the channel, "Hey, who removed the custodian core rights? It's asking for escrow token." Silence. Then Karen, "What the hell is custodian core?" My phone buzzed. A private chat from Jalen, my former neighbor mentee. Just 2 words, she doesn't know. No, she didn't. Karen had never once looked into the back-end dependencies, never read the license footer in the system she'd been parading around to investors at the last block party. She thought because the interface worked in staging, it would survive production. But there was no production. There was a breathing machine, paused, mid-inhale, waiting for the right credentials to finish the sentence. At 9:41, someone from the finance committee pinged the rollout group asking why the community pool booking wasn't processing Stripe syncs. By 9:45, the first resident ticket came in about the gate contractor being denied access for lawn maintenance. By 10:05, Karen was on a frantic call in her driveway, voice low but rising. Well, no. Someone must have touched the routing structure. We tested it. It was there yesterday. No, got in. You tested a clone, and the real system doesn't perform for counterfeits. Meanwhile, I sat 2 houses away on my porch, sipping stale break room coffee from the night before, reading a book about neighborhood governance. I didn't need to interfere. The build was working exactly as written. This wasn't a failure. It was the system holding its breath, waiting, silent like me. They didn't open with a threat. That's not how compliance works. When the audit committee called me Monday morning, the voice was polite, almost gentle, like someone carefully cracking open a safe they didn't want to trip. Hi, she said. We're reviewing some language from the core compliance agreement. Would you be available to walk us through your interpretation of Clause 8.4c? Interpretation. That word always makes me smile. There's no interpretation when the clause is written by the architect. There's only function. I didn't ask questions. Didn't waste time. I opened my private archive folder tag with the same escrow ID that auto-pings legal whenever a custodial pause is triggered. Forwarded 3 files. The license agreement highlighting sections 8.4c, 9.3, and the appended custodian override addendum signed by the founding board and general counsel 3 fiscal years ago. The chat transcript from the week before Karen's push back your presentation message, the calendar ghosting, and the compliance lead's baffled post about missing custodian core rights. Plus the version control report from Friday morning. Her initials on the stale, clone, time-stamped 5:37 p.m. matched against the actual verified build hash I'd parked under the pause stream. That was all I said in the reply. No editorializing, no commentary, just per request custodial execution trace enclosed. What I didn't mention was that legal already had this for 72 hours. In fact, the system had sent the escrow packet the moment I revoked Karen's token, time-stamped, encrypted, delivered. Within hours, the signs of fallout started surfacing. Quietly at first. The portal updated the project tag from active launch support to on-hold custodial review. Then a new group chat appeared in my sidebar. Reassigned compliance core stream invitation only. No emojis, just a slow drip of structured messages verifying asset chain, requesting architecture audit. Standby for IP assessment. Then came the thread that tipped the balance. Someone from infrastructure, I think the guy who mows the common areas, posted in the internal governance group. Does anyone have clarity on who technically owns core stream custody? Legal asking. I didn't reply. Someone else did. Jalen wrote, as of latest license amendment, K. Baird, listed as architect and custodian through FY26, verified escrow token holder. Silence. Then a short message from legal confirmed. Escrow timestamp aligns with the custodial pause. No breach detected, just execution. And that was it. One sentence, nothing dramatic. But if you know how these systems work, how neighborhoods protect their rules when founders embed ownership in architecture, that sentence is the quiet equivalent of a boardroom gavel. Karen didn't message me, didn't walk by, didn't even send a passive-aggressive emoji like she usually did because she knew or was finally starting to. I didn't celebrate, didn't screenshot the messages or forward them to friends. This wasn't a victory. It was just truth landing. She tried to present something she didn't build. She tried to bypass a system that doesn't forget. And now that system, my system, was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Freeze, flag, forward. It never had to scream. It just had to show its receipts. I heard her coming before I saw her. The sidewalk always gave her away. Heels too heavy. Stride too fast, like someone trying to prove she belonged in charge of gravity. I didn't look up when she stopped in front of my porch. Not at first. I was halfway through cleaning up a regression flag in the logging script. It was a quiet task, the kind that keeps your hands busy while your mind watches everything else unravel in slow motion. She didn't knock on the imaginary door. "Why don't my badge and portal accounts work?" she snapped. Not asked, demanded. Like a woman who still thought volume equaled authority. I looked up, calm, measured, not smug, just done. "Didn't I mention?" I said, like I was reminding her about a missing semicolon. "Custodial control reverts to the system architect upon breach." She blinked once, didn't speak. Then I turned back to my screen. There was nothing left to say. The breach wasn't just technical. It was procedural, structural, legal. The system didn't lock her out because I wanted it to. It did because it had to. She stood there for another 5 seconds. That awkward suspended silence that only happens when someone realizes they've lost a game they didn't even know they were playing. Then she walked off. No reply, no accusation, just footsteps. This time slower, heavier, like someone realizing they just stepped into the part of the story where they're no longer in charge. I waited until I heard her front door close behind her. Then I tapped into the audit logs and reviewed the exact timestamp. 7:44 a.m. Her last recorded access attempt. System flagged her profile, rerouted her to null permissions, and revoked active tokens. 7:43 a.m. That's when the protocol initiated, a single minute earlier. The system moves faster than ego. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. Karen hadn't just tripped a wire. She walked into a wall she thought was decorative. I pulled up the custodian log and checked for anomalies. None. Everything had moved like clockwork. Access token deleted. Project override locked. Founder clause enforcement. My screen was just green check marks and clean code. Across the neighborhood, the energy shifted. People weren't whispering, but they weren't making noise either. The kind of silence that grows when everyone feels something cracking underneath them, but isn't ready to admit it yet. I sipped what was left of my coffee, lukewarm but steady, and I waited because that was only the first hit. The bigger ones were coming, and they'd come wrapped in signatures, not sirens. The memo dropped at 10:12 a.m. Just after the first coffee break, just before the weekly product stand-up. The weekly board Zoom. People usually skimmed internal comms like they skimmed terms and conditions, but not this time. This one had a subject line that felt like a shot fired through a conference room wall. Subject, custody transfer guidelines immediate enforcement. There was no dramatic header, no legal labyrinth, just clean language, surgical intent. Infrastructure launched under private custodial license must remain unaltered without countersigned transfer from architect of record. No names, no blame. But every neighbor, every committee member, every stakeholder who read it knew exactly who and what it was about. The whispers didn't take long. You could almost hear the mental filing cabinets unlocking across driveways. People remembering ignored footers, old Git history logs, that one onboarding slide no one ever paid attention to until now. By lunch, Karen was out of her office, her garage converted to command center. Word was temporary reassignment, strategic projects elsewhere. Classic HOA speak for she touched something she didn't own, and the house lawyers snapped shut like a mousetrap. I got the meeting invite at 2:08 p.m. from the board chair's assistant. Just my name, just his. I accepted without replying. When I walked into the community center boardroom, it was just him. No legal, no HR buffer. He didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake, just looked at me with a tired kind of clarity I hadn't seen on his face in over a year. He folded his hands, took a breath. What would it take to reinstate Core Stream? Not, we're sorry. Not, let's talk about what happened. Just a business question. It was the only way he knew how to show respect, by skipping apology and asking for terms. I pulled a single page from my folder and slid it across the table. It didn't list demands. No revenge. No grandstanding, just clean terms. Typed in 12 points font. Custodial recognition through FY26. Dual cosign for all future framework forks. Custody protocol visible in dev and legal dashboards. Quarterly architecture reviews co-led by systems and compliance. One designated successor nominated by me. He read it twice, said nothing. Then his eyes flicked to the bottom of the page. The last line in small gray font. Escrow deployment available upon mutual reinstatement. He nodded once. That was it. No back and forth, no red lines. I stood up. He stayed seated. As I reached the door, he finally said something soft, almost under his breath. You built something solid. I paused, just enough to acknowledge it without letting it matter. Then I walked out. Back in the neighborhood, the group chat was quiet. No Karen, no pinging about feature gaps or API timeouts. Just people working with the quiet intensity of a crew realizing they'd nearly sunk their own ship by following the wrong captain. I didn't gloat. Didn't say I told you so. I just sent one private message to Jalen. Start prepping the reinstatement branch. Use clean diff. Nothing gets pushed until I validate the chain. He replied instantly. On it. Because now they understood. This wasn't about ego. It was about custody. And custody never yells. It just writes the rules and waits for the world to read them. The documents were signed by Friday quietly. No company-wide announcement, no leadership photo op, no internal email chain about lessons learned, just signatures. Mine, the board chair's, and one compliance liaison's initials in the margins beside each clause. The new framework didn't restore what Karen had tried to erase. It didn't need to. It built something better, stronger, clearer, and sealed in language even Karen couldn't misinterpret. The reinstatement terms were simple. Quarterly custodial audits. Every core asset matched against original chain of custody. Any override required dual signature, systems architect, and board rep. Escrow rights tied to chain compliance. No exceptions. The board chair called it operational clarity. I called it protection. But here's what mattered more than the paperwork. I wasn't coming back. That part surprised him. I saw it in the half-second of hesitation before he said, understood. I think he expected me to claim the throne, to march back into the org chart like a conquering hero. Name on the wall, badge reactivated. But that's not how you protect something valuable. You don't sit in the open and hope it holds. You fortify it from the edges. Quietly, permanently. So I made one final recommendation. Jalen. He blinked. Jalen. I nodded. He's been running my backup scripts for almost a year. He rewrote half the dependency checkers you still use in test staging. He's good. And more importantly, he's steady. The board chair didn't argue. He just asked, will you still have oversight? My license stays active, I said. I'll review every quarter, but Jalen signs the daily. He's ready. I meant it. Not because Jalen was loud or ambitious, but because he was thoughtful. He listened more than he spoke. He didn't chase credit. He chased correctness. And over 2 years of late-night debugging sessions, build optimizations, and quiet group chats, he learned what really mattered. The core team wasn't a slide deck. It wasn't who sat closest to the president or who got the early invites. It was the ones who stayed late without telling anyone, who documented because it was right, not because it would be seen. And now Karen's precious core board, the one she curated with handshakes and performance reviews, was gone, replaced by a structure I built from the shadows. And the irony, she never even noticed it forming. Jalen took over the branch the following week. First deployment under his lead went live without a hitch. No errors, no rollback, just clean delivery and a short note in the version log. Stream resumed. Signature JB custody verified. He didn't tag me. Didn't have to. But I saw it and I smiled. Because sometimes the best seat at the table is no seat at all. Sometimes you build the walls, set the boundaries, hand off the key, and step outside. Not because you were pushed out, but because you finally chose the terms. By the end of the quarter, Core Stream was back online. Not louder, Not faster, just steady. Exactly how I designed it. The panic had drained from the neighborhood like a slow exhale. And the silence that followed was different now. Not suspicious, not scared, just still. Like an engine finally tuned to its right rhythm. Jalen was thriving. You could see in the logs. Cleaner commits, fewer hot fixes, comments left in his code that sounded like notes to a future engineer instead of a desperate breadcrumb trail. He started mentoring one of the junior committee members too. I didn't suggest it. He just knew. That's what real custodians do. Build systems meant to last past them. Every time someone logged into the admin panel, there was in small text at the bottom of the screen. Quiet, unmoving custodial framework core version 3.0. License to K. Bared through 2026. Escrow key required. Some people noticed it and moved on. Others whispered about it in planning meetings like a rumor that had become architecture. Nobody dared touch it. Not anymore. I never heard from Karen again. Not a group chat message, not an apology, not a ping asking what really happened. I imagine she's somewhere else now, polishing a different pitch deck for her next HOA gig, trying to act like what happened here wasn't a loss, just misalignment. People like her don't write postmortems, they write new bios. But the people who mattered, they learned. At the next board offsite, buried between revenue projections and expansion slides, one line flicked past on a deck labeled operational lessons. Respect system boundaries or be locked out. No attribution, no case study, just the warning. I didn't raise my hand, didn't nod. I just sipped my coffee and looked out the window. They didn't need to know I'd written that slide or that I was the reason they understood what it meant. Because control doesn't come from yelling in meetings or cutting in line for credit. It doesn't come from titles, calendars, or who gets invited to what. Control is quieter than that. It's a license clause at the bottom of a file no one thought to read. It's the backup protocol no one noticed being triggered. It's the silence between clicks. The one that only breaks when you've crossed a line that was always there, waiting. Control isn't about shouting. It's about writing the rules they didn't bother to. And in Sunnyvale Estates, those rules are back where they belong, guarded, respected, and quietly unbreakable. The grass is still exactly 2.5 inches. The flags wave in approved colors, and the pool bookings flow without a hitch. But now everyone knows the price of forgetting who built the guardrails. Karen's lawn? Still perfect on the outside. Inside her house, though, the lights stay on a little longer these days. Like she's waiting for a system alert that will never come again. The neighbors wave at me now with a different kind of nod. Not the polite HOA nod. The knowing one. The one that says, we saw what you did, and we're glad. Jalen runs the show like a pro, but every quarter I get the escrow packet, review the diffs, sign off with a single keystroke. No drama. No spotlight. Just stewardship. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's the kind that lets the system speak for itself, then hands the keys to someone who'll keep the peace without needing the glory. And if another Karen ever tries to clone the rules again, well, Clause 8.4c is still there. Waiting. Smiling in the code like it always has. Ready to pause the whole neighborhood once more and remind everyone that some foundations don't forgive. They just remember. The end? Not really. The stream is live. The rules are fair. And the architect? He's still watching from the porch, coffee in hand, ready for whatever comes next. Because in this neighborhood, justice doesn't arrive with sirens. It arrives with a quiet click and a frozen dashboard. And that's the sweetest sound you'll ever hear when the Karen finally gets what she deserves.